What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we're going to be discussing three players that we think could have a big breakout season for the New York Giants in 2023. Some of these players who are starting to come up, starting to play a little bit better maybe towards the end of last season, and have some opportunities with an expanded role this upcoming season to really make a name for themselves. And once we discuss these players, you'll kind of get a sense of whether or not you agree or disagree, and if you have any thoughts about these players, please drop them down below in the comment section so we can discuss these players that we are going to be mentioning in today's episode. But if these players are to take that big step, have those breakout campaigns for the Giants this upcoming season, I think it could be big time for this team in terms of taking that step forward and hopefully making it even further into the postseason. But we're going to go ahead and discuss these three players now. But before we get into all of that, please make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And who is the first breakout player that you want to discuss?
I'm doing great, and it's exciting to talk about the Giants having some potential breakout players based on their 2022 performances. There's a couple that obviously stand out. The most notable one is Evan Neal, and I think it's kind of important that we realize that Evan Neal succeeding in 2023 could be the difference between the Giants having a good and bad offense. You know what I mean? Those tackle positions are essential, and Evan Neal was a liability as a rookie. Now, we did have that MCL injury he sustained against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 7. His stats after that, his numbers after that, were really bad, and ultimately, I feel as though that held him back to a degree. It definitely limited his efficiency and productiveness, and Evan Neal's the type of player that has a tremendous work ethic, right? He was 21 years old last year. Now he's 22 years old. He's in a prime situation to take a big step forward. Look, he's 6'7", 350 pounds. The only other player that is that size on the team is Dexter Lawrence, and they're both freak athletes. I do believe that Evan Neal has the work ethic and the athleticism to translate into a very good right tackle at the NFL level. He struggled with speed, right? Like, that was his big thing last year. He struggled with speed off the edge. Guys that were heavier and had more of a power rush concept were a lot more easy for Evan Neal to manage. But when it came to the speed rushers, like Hassan Reddick against the Eagles, those guys that just use their bend and leverage around the edge, he was not able to stand up and make those plays and really lock down in pass protection. So he's been working diligently this offseason to improve his kick step and really improve his fundamentals, which hopefully translates to a much better campaign. But I think that he is primed for a breakout year simply because, one, he can't get much worse than his rookie season. His rookie season was really bad, right? Like, you're talking about 862 snaps, he gave up 8 sacks, 52 total pressures. He had a couple games where he gave up at least 5 pressures, 8 against the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 14, 8 against the Minnesota Vikings in the wildcard game, 7 hurries. This is a player that isn't used to this type of battering, right? Like, at the Alabama level, like at the collegiate level, he was dominant. He destroyed collegiate talent, and it wasn't even close. Like, he was so good. But then he goes to the NFL, and things get a little bit more difficult. Obviously, he's trying to adjust to the speed and the physicality of the game. But I feel as though refining his fundamentals, working on his game to translate better. And at his size, you have to find ways to compensate for the lack of flexibility you're going to have at that kind of frame, right? 6'7", 350 pounds. You're not going to be a yoga master. You're not going to be a yoga teacher. You're going to have to find ways to compensate for that lack of mobility at times. But he's a freak athlete, and he has the work ethic to improve. So I think it's more about fixing his kick step, fixing his ability to lock down on the outside. He got beat around the edge a lot. So I think that there are things he can do to tweak his game that will improve his overall performance. But why do you think Evan Neal could take a big step forward? I think, as I said, couldn't get much worse than his rookie season. But at the end of the day, this is a player with the work ethic, the tangible traits, and the intangible qualities to become a tremendous player. And we need him to be, because that right tackle position, if he locks it down, and that left tackle with Andrew Thomas, bookend tackles, you're talking about a pretty awesome unit there that will give Daniel Jones the time to succeed in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, we know how important offensive line play is, so Evan Neal taking that step forward could have massive repercussions, positive reinforcement on the offense in general. But one of the reasons that I think that he could be a lot better in year 2 is the fact that he'll be healthier. I think a lot of Giants fans forget about the fact that for a while there, Evan Neal was playing through a partial tear, I believe, in his MCL. So when you're looking at it from that perspective, he went down with a knee injury in Week 7 versus Jacksonville, comes back in week 13 versus Washington, and maybe wasn't the same player for at least a month there, I would say. He really struggled to get things going following that injury, which was really unfortunate timing because he was actually starting to play a whole lot better just before that injury. And then, of course, as soon as the injury happened, his play started to fall off a bit. I do think that Evan Neal had his solid moments throughout the season, but in general, I think the main difference for him between college and the NFL is speed, right? We all know that the pro game is significantly faster than the collegiate game. And I think it just took a long, kind of readjustment period for Evan Neal here as he kind of tried to get acclimated to the speed of the next level. And going into year two, having already gone up against that speed, that top end speed that edge rushers possess at the next level throughout his rookie season, I think that he'll be more prepared and more well suited to play on the Giants offensive line this upcoming season. So when you talk about those Hassan Reddicks of the world and those other speed rushers around the edge, I think that all the work that he's doing this offseason on that kick step, on his footwork, that's all because he learned that he couldn't get away with what he was doing in college anymore. So he's going to make the necessary improvements and hopefully have a big breakout season in year two. Now, it's not uncommon to see, offensive linemen really struggle in their first season. Sometimes offensive linemen will struggle for the first 2 seasons before having a breakout maybe in year three. We know that Andrew Thomas had his breakout in his second season, but then really broke out and became an all-pro level player in year three. Now we can kind of look at Evan Neal and hope that he has a similar career trajectory. Now, I also will point out it's very uncommon to have all-pro players just step onto the field, right? So Andrew Thomas developing into an all-pro, that's not really the norm. That's kind of an outlier there. But if the Giants can figure out how to unlock that out of Evan Neal as well, I think that you're looking at one of the best offensive tackle duos in the game right now. So it would be huge for the Giants to get Evan Neal to take that big step forward. And we know that he has the potential. I mean, he has the brute strength, the power, the force from that right tackle spot. And I know some will argue with all that power and force, he should move into the interior and play right guard instead, right? We've heard that argument quite a few times, but I do think that it's also worth pointing out that in his collegiate career, Evan Neal barely ever played right tackle. He only played it for like half a season as a freshman, I believe. So he hasn't played that position in 4 years. Making the transition from left tackle to right tackle is not as easy as many might think. So he just needs more time with the position, more time to figure things out and start working on some of those mistakes that he was making. And I do believe that a big breakout will be in store for Evan Neal. I think that he will take a significant step forward this season and then hopefully another step forward in year three and then be a dominant force at the right tackle spot for the Giants. But let's talk about another player who I think could have a breakout season. We're going to flip over to the defensive side of the ball and talk about the cornerback spot because we know that the Giants just went ahead, spent the 24th overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft on Deonte Banks. We love that selection. But Banks is playing on the outside, right? He's going to be your boundary cornerback opposite of Adoree Jackson. Right now, I think that there's a position battle brewing at that slot cornerback position. I can name a few players off the top of my head. Aaron Robinson, Darnay Holmes, and the guy that we want to discuss, Cordell Flot. Because Cordell Flot did struggle quite tremendously as a rookie, but started to pick it up towards the end of the year. Had a crucial pass breakup in the wild card round in the victory over the Minnesota Vikings. So we were starting to see Cordell Flot put it together, start to become a better player. And now he has an opportunity here to win a starting job. If he's able to do that, it could be a big breakout season in store for Cordell Flot. So Alex, what are you thinking about Flot, coming off of a up and down rookie season? I guess that's a kind of a kind way to put it. But coming off of that rookie season, going into year two, having an opportunity to become a starter in the Giants defense, what are your thoughts on the potential of him having a breakout campaign?
Look, it's kind of interesting because I think that Cordell Flot's weaknesses will be the opposite of Darnay Holmes's, right? Darnay Holmes is a good run-stopping nickel corner. He can get into, the defensive back, or rather the offensive backfield. He can blow up some screen passes. We've seen him with that type of vision and that type of reaction timing, and he's good in the run. Like, I think that Cordell Flot will have the opposite situation where I think he's really good in coverage, but he struggles against the run because of his size. The fact that you have Deonte Banks now and the fact that you have Adoree Jackson suggests that Cordell Flot can compete on the interior slot spot. Like, and I think that that's ultimately where he will have an opportunity to get starting reps because Banks is an immediate starter. Adoree Jackson's obviously a starter. So when you're looking at Flot, you ask yourself, where's the best place for him to play? It's probably in the slot. And last year, he didn't play much there. He only played 15 reps in the slot, 272 out on the boundary. Obviously, out of LSU, third-round pick last year. He's 6'1" and 175 pounds. He may be a little bit heavier than that now because he's needed to kind of fill out his frame. I feel like Flot, with a little bit more size to his game, will be better. His coverage grades are solid. Like, he gave up let's see, 178 yards and a 64% reception rate, which is not bad at all. He did give up one touchdown. He had three pass breakups, and obviously, as you mentioned earlier, his 3 reps against Minnesota in the wildcard game were very big, and he had one big pass breakup on Justin Jefferson, which ended up kind of sealing the win for us. But he had a couple of decent games. Minnesota in Week 16 played 41 total snaps, only gave up 8 yards on 3 targets. This is a player who looked solid at times, but again, it's the size that concerns me. It's the run-stopping qualities that a nickel corner needs to contain that may hold him back. But if he gains a little bit of size, refines his tackling technique, we did have a 13.8% missed tackle rate, which is pretty significant over such a small sample size of snaps. 142 snaps to miss 13, almost 14% of his tackles definitely is not ideal. So I'll ask you this. Do you think that he has to gain a little bit more size, or do you think that he can step into a slot role and be quality? I think he'll be a good coverage corner. Like I said, the opposite of Darnay Holmes. I think he's a good coverage corner, but I think he may struggle against the run at times.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, you would assume that a player of that size is going to struggle against the run. Cordell Flot, very skinny, just a wiry player, but he does play with a good amount of physicality. He played at LSU during his collegiate career, and if I remember correctly, he played on the boundary and was a press man corner for LSU. So he definitely has the ability to get physical, at least against wide receivers. But you're right in saying that a guy that size, can he hold up in the run game? Can he hold up defending the run? Trying to make a run stop against a guy like, a Bijan Robinson entering the NFL this year, right? Would he be able to make that tackle? And I think that's a big question mark for Cordell Flot. But if it's something that he's been working on all offseason long, if he does add some weight, add some strength, goes into training camp and starts tackling and hitting, I think that you go into the regular season comfortable with him in the slot because he does have a lot of potential as a coverage guy. Now, I know that Flot also coming into the NFL, some scouts were saying maybe he can move to safety at some point, free safety. But then again, of course, the size and the inability to stop the run, it's the same question mark there. So that's really going to be his kryptonite, but I think that that's pretty obvious that he knows that, so he should hopefully be working on that and then fixing his ability to play in the run. And if Cordell Flot does find that ability, does gain that strength, or maybe just get that good tackling form, whatever the case might be, if he finds that ability to become a run stopper, right, to at least contribute in the run game, then I think you can have a really, really solid player on your hands in Flot because, again, he's got the height, he's got the press ability, he's got all the coverage ability, the ball skills. He's got really good ball skills, actually. And that's all the stuff that you want from a slot cornerback. But, yeah, you do need him to contribute in the running game. Another thing to point out, though, is that for slot cornerbacks, they don't play all 3 downs. They usually play 2 downs, or they're only on the field for passing downs, right? So 3rd and 10, 4th and 15, right? Those long downs. He's not going to need to stop the run on those plays. So Cordell Flot, yes, he needs to have the ability to stop the run, but at the same time, he's not going to be asked to stop the run very often because the Giants are likely only going to put him out on the field for passing downs, plays where they believe that the offense is going to throw the football. And then again, with his coverage abilities, his ball skills, that's when you want him on the field. And if that's how the Giants utilize him, you could see a breakout season out of Cordell Flot. Again, can he hold up in the run game? I'm not so sure. If he's on the field for all those 1st and 2nd downs where the team is running the ball, he's probably not going to hold up in the run game, and that's not going to be his fault. That's going to be the fault of the Giants. But making him your nickel cornerback does not mean he's going to be on the field on those running downs. It means that you're going to have him on the field for those passing downs, which, again, should put him in positions to make plays like the one that he made in the crucial wild card game versus Minnesota. So I think when you look at it from that perspective with Cordell Flot, he really could take a big step forward depending on how the Giants place him into their defense. But let's talk about a player getting placed into the offense, Isaiah Hodgins. Now, one might argue that he kind of had his breakout, right? He got claimed off of waivers by the Giants after being released by the Buffalo Bills, and he did break out. He became Daniel Jones's favorite target pretty much overnight, and Isaiah Hodgins instantly won a starting role. He was phenomenal. We all became big Isaiah Hodgins fans during the regular season, and especially in the postseason when he put up over 100 receiving yards against Minnesota in the wild card round. So, looking at Hodgins, What else is there for him? Can he have another breakout? And in my opinion, I think that he can. I think there's more room for improvement here and room for him to take a huge step forward. The Giants did not get that wide receiver one in free agency or the draft this offseason. So that wide receiver room, while they did add Jalen Hyatt to it, that's a completely different player than a player like Isaiah Hodgins. And when you're looking at this wide receiver room, there's an opportunity here for Hodgins to really carve out a role as the Giants' WR1 this upcoming season, because Hodgins, 6'3", he's the Giants' tallest starting receiver. I know we have Colin Johnson in the reserves, but for the starters, Hodgins is the tallest outside wide receiver that they have, and he is the most physical, and he does have the ability to separate on all those deep crossers. He's going to be the starting X receiver this upcoming season, most likely. And in that role, he could really, really make a name for himself. We saw a lot out of Hodgins during the second half of last season. But keep in mind, it was only one half of one season. If he had a full off season to train with the Giants last year, to learn the playbook, to gel with Daniel Jones, he might have been an even better player during that regular season and postseason run. So now that he has that, he's got this off season to study the playbook more, to get better developed with that chemistry with Daniel Jones, to kind of gel better with the offensive coaching staff. All of those little things that he didn't get last year, Hodgins is getting this offseason, which should allow him to come into this regular season fully prepared to make a massive impact as arguably the Giants' WR1 entering the regular season. So I think there is a big opportunity here for Hodgins. I know he had his little breakout midway through last year, but he could break out once again. I mean, a lot of people know his name now, but if he has a big year this year, everyone will know Isaiah Hodgins' name as the Giants' leading receiver. And I think that would be a really, really exciting outcome for a guy who, again, was claimed off waivers midway through last season. One of my favorite pickups by Joe Schoen during his time as general manager so far. So when you're looking at it from that perspective, Alex, kind of Isaiah Hodgins having this offseason to gel with the team, something that he didn't have last year. What do you think that can mean for him as he hopefully steps into 2023 in an expanded role and has a breakout year as the Giants' WR1 potentially?
Yeah, I mean, look, Hodgins is a really exciting player. This is a player who stepped in on day one and immediately had substantial chemistry with Daniel Jones. And you know how hard it is for a receiver at the NFL level who was on a practice squad to step into a starting spot and immediately produce like he's been playing with the quarterback for years, right? Hodgins and Daniel Jones immediately connected. They had really good chemistry. The ball was always in the right place. They were running timing routes. This was a really interesting situation for the Giants to stumble upon because Hodgins was sitting on the Buffalo Bills practice squad essentially rotting because of the depth they have at that position. And we end up picking up a guy who has wide receiver 2 upside, right? I legitimately think Hodgins, and by the way, he had an ankle injury for the last 3 games of the season, and which hampered him, and he still produced, by the way. This is a player I think has WR2 upside, and I think that's pretty insane that he was sitting on a practice squad, right? This is a 6'4", 210-pound receiver. The Giants traditionally have been going after smaller guys the last couple of years, but Hodgins is a big boy, right? He can go up and make big catches. He's physical. He's got really good hands, and he's smart as hell. I think that he does have a little bit of ways to go when it comes to route running and kind of learning our system and our scheme and, finding his role in it. But that's a good thing because that means his potential is still untapped. There's still a lot left there to find. He had a 78.6% catch rate last year for the Giants, guys. I mean, think about that. Think about a receiver with an 80% catch rate. We haven't had someone like that in a very long time, and this is a player who you can commit and depend upon to come up with big plays, and we saw him do that against Minnesota. And for what it's worth, he had 4 touchdowns in 8 games, guys. 4 touchdowns in 8 games. I mean, Kenny Golladay had 1 touchdown his entire career, and Davis Webb, his entire career as a Giant, Davis Webb was the one that threw him that football. You know what I mean? Hodgins stepped in and immediately became our best red zone weapon in the receiving game. It is hard to really put a number on the value that Isaiah Hodgins has. I'm very happy we extended him on that small. It's kind of like a minimum deal, to be honest. He's so cheap for the quality we're getting him at, and I'd love to extend him on multiple years if he continues to develop and become a prominent player for us. 351 yards on 42 targets last year. Hodgins has got the quality to be a very, very solid player for us. He's only 24 years old. He's young, out of Oregon State, obviously. I do really like this player. He's a big fan. We're a big fan of his. We think he's got a lot of untapped potential. But how do you think his role develops in this scheme? Because I don't think he's like a big 50-50 like jump ball receiver. I think he actually is a pretty solid route runner. He's got tremendous hands. He has a lot of good chemistry with Daniel Jones. I only see his role developing. Do you think he could end up being our top receiver? I think Darren Waller, like by, de facto is going to be our top target because of what he's accomplished at the NFL level. But in terms of pure receiver, I actually think Hodgins could be our top gun this year until we go out and get like a prominent wide receiver one. But in the meantime, he could be our top guy, and I think he would be a really nice complement to like a legitimate elite receiver if we went out and eventually got one like that, like a Stephon Diggs. Like I'm not saying that would be the ideal guy, but maybe like a Brandon Ayuk. There could be so many different other options here. But I see him as a perfect complement to a top gun.
Yeah, no, I do too, and I think that this upcoming season, you're right. Darren Waller is probably going to be that top gun for the Giants, but when you're looking at it, that's from the tight end position. So what are they getting in terms of production out of the wide receiver position? And again, I think that there's an opportunity here because the Giants didn't add a bunch of talent to their wide receiver core this offseason. I think there's a chance for Hodgins to really take a step forward and carve out his role as WR1 in New York's offense. Again, I don't envision him as being that big 50-50 guy either, right? He's not your contested catch wide receiver. He's a good route runner, but he also has a big body, which allows him to play against press coverage at the X receiver spot and then go ahead and make all those deep crossers that the Giants love to run, right? Those post routes, those digs, those crossers, everything like that. The Giants love to run those kinds of route concepts that kind of wait for players to get into those pockets between the zones. Hodgins has a really good feel for the field. He has very good field awareness and spatial awareness, and that allows him to find opportunities downfield between those little pockets in the zones and make some big receptions. So when I'm looking at Hodgins' role this upcoming year, I do think he can be WR1 for the Giants. I mean, you're talking about him. Wan'Dale Robinson will come back playing out of the slot. You have, of course, Jalen Hyatt entering the mix, but he's probably going to play out of the slot as well. A lot of question marks about his ability to play against press coverage. And then, of course, Darius Slayton, who probably plays on the outside alongside Isaiah Hodgins. But when you look at the production from Slayton throughout the last season, listen, he was great. He was the Giants' leading receiver, but Hodgins' production was just as good as his, if not better, in half the amount of time. During the time frame that Hodgins and Slayton shared the field, Hodgins, in my opinion, was the better player. Slayton kind of disappeared in some of those games, but it felt like Hodgins was pretty much making big plays week in, week out, scored a bunch of touchdowns across like just 1 month of football. I think he had 5 touchdowns. So Hodgins is somebody who really impressed me when he stepped onto the field for the Giants last year. And again, when I'm looking at his role this upcoming season, I honestly, if we're talking fantasy football, I think this could be a massive sleeper, a late round in a league. You draft Isaiah Hodgins and you take a chance on him because his production really could hit WR1 levels. I could see him easily getting at least 800 receiving yards this upcoming year and scoring a good amount of touchdowns, because another key factor here when talking about Hodgins, he's very good in the red zone. And it's not like he's good in the red zone where he goes up there and he makes these contested 50-50 catches. No, again, it ties into the fact that he's a very smart football player with great spatial awareness. He finds those little pockets, sits down in those zones, gets himself open. He does that all across the field, including the red zone. Makes him a very valuable player for the New York Giants. So I'm super excited for Isaiah Hodgins this upcoming year. I could see a massive breakout for this kid as he elevates into that X receiver role and hopefully becomes the Giants' WR1 in their offense in 2023. But I'm really excited about all 3 of these players that we discussed: Hodgins, Neal, Flot. I think a big year could be in store for all 3 of them, and of course in total for the New York Giants in 2023. I'm very hopeful about the season. I think that Joe Shane crushed the free agency period. I think that he crushed the 2023 NFL draft. And of course, I trust in our AP head coach of the year, Brian Daboll, to put it all together and hopefully lead the Giants to another successful season this upcoming year. But what are your thoughts on these 3 players that we discussed? Let us know down below in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you do not miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.